Hello and happy Monday. It's Jackie here, obviously from TBA Law, doing my quick Monday information video. Sorry, I had a little bit of technical difficulty in the last one, so this is take 2. And topic today that I wanted to talk to you about was the possibility of people making claims against your will. So if you're doing a will, I quite often get people ask me, well, if I do my will anyway and it can be disputed, what's the point of doing a will? Well, if I take you back a little bit, I often explain to people the myth of testamentary freedom, right? So in Australia, in all states, we are able to do whatever we like in our will. So we have freedom to make whatever will we want. Unlike many other countries whose legislation actually says what happens if someone passes away, and they may have partial testamentary freedom as to a certain percentage of their estate, but they may not have complete testamentary freedom. So here in Australia, we have testamentary freedom. We can do whatever we want in our will. However, and there's always a but, what the law has done over the last 400 years, 500 years or so, is said that there are certain people in your life whom you have an obligation to, a moral obligation to look after. And hence, if you don't look after those people in your will, the law can come in afterwards and make sure that those people get something, right? So that has developed into the various pieces of legislation that we have in each state in Australia. So in Victoria, it's the Administration and Probate Act, and there's a section in that act, or a whole part actually, part 4, which allows family provision claims. So someone to make a claim against a will if they have not been provided for. Now the law in Victoria has actually changed a lot over the last couple of years. It used to be open slather for a while. It was really anyone who could try and claim that there was any obligation whatsoever. So it was often carers, neighbours who'd done some gardening or gone and got groceries for an elderly person. All those sorts of people were able to make claims. Nephews and nieces and people further down the line in terms of closeness of relationship could make claims as well. But that's been stopped, right? So the categories have tightened right up in Victoria, and realistically, the legislation is now there to look after spouses, children, and financial dependents, right? So those are the main categories. There are a few subcategories, and quite often a stepchild will be included as a child as well. Minor children and adult children have different standings, and people who are financially dependent have extra proofs to prove, right? But again, this legislation arose because, 150 years ago, husbands didn't necessarily leave their estate to their wives, and their wives were left destitute, and so they were allowed to make a claim. So you can see in some circumstances, this legislation is only fair. The other circumstance which is arising more and more these days is because our elderly are living longer, and quite often maybe one family member or a carer inserts themselves into that person's life. And whilst wills during the person's life previously had been quite balanced, leaving things equally to their kids, sometimes a will later in life will have a major shift and leave everything to a carer or one child and leave the others out. Now, the law doesn't necessarily think that that's fair, and it's probably not at the level where someone could dispute the validity of the will to say, well, mum didn't know what she was doing anymore, or that there was undue influence, which is way too hard to prove, right? So the family provision legislation allows for kids to come back in and say, we haven't been provided for. So I'm giving you a very brief overview really, because it's quite complex. But That's basically the people who can make a claim against the will and why, right? So, what can we do about it? Because if you really do want to leave someone out of your will and they are in one of those categories of someone who could make a claim, you can do something about it, right? So, you can still make your will and leave them out. So that's the first thing you can do. If the relationship is so bad that you've disowned each other, then potentially that person won't come to your funeral and won't make a claim against your will because they're like, I don't want anything from that person, I've got on with my life, and there's nothing where that they're going to come back, right? So that's the first scenario. You just do your will how you want to do it. Second scenario is you are worried that the person you're leaving out may come back and make a claim. So you still do your will, but you put a special clause in to say that, you know, I have considered all these things and omitted this person and give a reason, right? One of the reasons why claims against wills are successful after someone passes away is because the prime witness is passed away. They're dead. So you can't give evidence yourself after you've passed away. So leave as much of that evidence as you can if you want to leave someone out of your will. So that's the second thing you could do. The third thing you could do is do some smart estate planning, right? And so I do quite often do some of this stuff. We're talking about moving assets potentially into joint names, moving stuff into trusts, or even changing the financial products that you hold so that they are not estate assets. Because if you minimise as much in your estate as possible, you know, someone making a claim on $10,000 and they want half of it, it's not much, it's not worth their time, right? So minimising the estate is the third thing you could do. A lot of people ask me, well, can I leave them $1 or can I leave them a token amount in the will and say if they dispute it, they get nothing? No, it's not a valid clause. It's an American concept, doesn't work in Australia. So just leave them out and give reasons, right? Because leaving them a small token is like a red flag to a bull, and you know, you're better off to say why you've left them out and give them proper explanation. All right, so there's some basic features on potential claims against a will that you're making, and the 3 strategies that we could use there. So firstly, just make your will how you want it. Secondly, make your will but give reasons. Or thirdly, let's do some more complex estate planning so that your estate's actually minimised, so that any claim, the damage of any claim would be minimal. So, I talk very fast when I get on the roll. I hope that makes sense. You can always go back and watch the video again. But thanks for tuning in. My name's Jackie, and I'll